Hey guys, Wintermute here, and today we'll be continuing with our low poly rendition of Dust 2, one of the most well-known maps in all FPS. Now, in this week's video, we're going to be working on adding detail to our low poly models, and we're also going to be adding materials, as well as setting up the environment for a final render. So, let's get started. So this is what we had last time, and I'm going to start with these hay bricks. So I'm just gonna use the outline of this cube, wherever it is, and I'm just going to add a couple of beveled cubes to it, and these are going to act as bricks. I'll lay them around in a spiralish fashion, and you'll notice that I don't actually have to fill in the middle. I'm just going to try to make this with a little bit of offset so it doesn't look too regular, and I'm going to try to keep everything kind of even. Now, it's not going to look very good if you just have all of the same bricks in the same orientation and size, so you're going to have to make a couple of modifications for sure. The only parts that really have to be completely filled in are the top and possibly the bottom if that's going to be revealed. So, since we placed it in the same place as our old mesh, we have it here. But I didn't deselect it properly, so I'm going to do that. And I'm going to try to place it back in the scene. There we go. So we have one of these hay bricks, and now we can just reuse this wherever we want. So there's just sort of a longer one on the bottom, so I'll just scale it up and put it there. But I'm also going to take this top face, trying to sever it properly, and I'm going to reuse it because some places only have the top of the bricks exposed, like these boxes up here. So I'm going to make a bit of an indent using the inset tool, and I'm just going to place these bricks right there. It's not going to look super great, but it's good enough. Definitely approximates the level of detail I'm looking for in this scene. We have the same effect out on the tall column box, and I'm going to take that top piece and put it there after playing with the matte cap settings a bit, just so I can see the detail. So I'm just going to leave this center right inside the box. Try to scale it up properly so it makes some sort of sense. Just leave it right there. I'll put 2 layers, so just a bit more detail without adding very many faces. And yeah, we can also add a bit of these posts things by beveling the edges, also creating more edge loops where that's necessary. And then extruding those bevels outwards. It's a pretty useful technique I'm going to use a lot. So just make some loop cuts and bevel them. Then you just need to extrude those bevels out, because that bevel effect creates a new face where each of those planes are, where each of those edges are. So you can just manipulate those faces as you wish. I'll make some insets to make the idea of planks, and I'm going to be doing this a lot, where I'm actually not going to, I'm going to try to texture this as little as possible and rather try to make all the detail through simple geometry. So here I could add like some rope textures or whatever, but I'm just going to extrude the top of it. And now for the barrels, I'm just taking a look at where all these weird sticking out edges are, and I'm just going to extrude them outwards using the same bevel tool, bevel and extrude method I did before. I'm going to delete that hallway, it doesn't look very good, and I'm going to replace these boxes again with some planks by just cutting in these plank shapes into it, as well as beveling in this top section, which would give us a bit more depth to the scene, although it looks a bit more sci-fi once you do that, which wasn't something I was anticipating. So I've extruded it out again, and I'm going to put
another one of these on top, roughly the same position as that placeholder cube, and I'm going to add another one of those hay bricks. Okay, so that box in the back, it's also just a box of hay bricks, so I'm going to just leave them like this, scaled up a little bit, and try to center it. So now remember, the important thing is to try to keep everything at a consistent level of detail, and that's not too easily quantifiable, but for example, you can see that just a simple cube wouldn't really do it here, and nor would that car, because that car you saw before was quite undetailed. Well, let's work on this back thing for now. You notice that we don't actually need all of the hay brick. We only need the bottom part exposed, so we can just use that. Then we don't have to worry about the top parts sort of sticking out. We also have those couple more ropes going in both directions, perpendicular to each other, so I'll just extrude them out like that. And these these barrels, I want to try to keep the placement correct, so I'm just going to duplicate them and place them over top of our placeholders. I'm using a lot of these props over again because I think that's a good workflow for something like this, and actually quite similar to how you would actually go about making a map. Now these crate boxes, again, I'm going to try not to texture these too much, and I'm just going to add edge loops where that's possible in order to manipulate the surface details. Now that first box, we don't really need too much because we're not going to be able to really see it, but I'll just leave it there for consistency and physical believability in case it's actually visible in any of the shots. Okay, so this part I'm going to add a couple of plank looking things, again using that bevel method, and have this tarp on top. Let's try to make it fit as well as possible. Remember, the number pad backslash is a really great way to add. The number pad backslash will let you isolate whatever your selection is and hide everything else in your scene, so it's a really great way to work on single objects in a complicated scene. I'm going to put some more barrels out here. I'm just going to leave them by the entrance, make sure they're above the ground, otherwise the freestyle line rendering is not going to work quite well. Okay, so let's make a couple improvements to this car. First, I'm going to add a bit of thickness with the solidify modifier, and then I'm going to straighten out these edge loops a bit. For some reason my number pad wasn't working here, so I'm just going to do it manually. And I'm going to remove the front windshield because I'm not going to add a glass texture. Sorry about that. Seems to be a truck passing by. Okay, adding the seats. This kind of messes up the bottom of the car because I'm extruding the floor of the card upwards, if you can imagine that. And also I'm going to rip out this door. So you can use V to edge rip, which will just separate an edge from everything else connected to it. And another important thing that you might want to do in this case is select the seats while you're making them and give them a vertex group so that when you actually have to shade them later, you don't have to select them by hand because that's kind of a pain. I'll make this bumper by just extruding out some stuff, and I'll cut a bit of a crease into the car. I know where I want this crease, so I can actually just refill in the edge loops in the way I want, since we can't actually loop cut something that's not a quad. Okay, now I can just extrude in this cut, and you can see we have a sort of dark line in the middle, cutting through the car, just like in our reference image. This bumper might be a little bit difficult because now the geometry with that bevel is quite messed up, so I'm going to make a new bit of geometry, try to fix it a bit. Honestly, I probably should have had the mirror modifier on at this point because the look of this is a bit messed up, but that's alright. And for the wheels, I'm just going to inset them a bit, and let's give them a bit of depth. I'm going to duplicate them to the other side and just, flip them. And I'm going to forget to parent them. Or am I? No, I'm not. Okay, so I did parent them. Great. So that looks about right. Just remember, if you don't parent them, because I don't think it was too visible, that you really need to, because if you don't, they're not going to move with the car. So if you rotate the car, the wheels are going to stay in place, and it's not going to go very well for you. Now these, I don't know what these are, planters or something, just inset them. And this door in the back that I just noticed, I wasn't too sure what to do with it, but oh well, I just insetted it. So now, scene setup, materials and lighting. So this is what we were working with before. Now, let's try to first add a couple of details. We want as the base material the dust color, as I'm going to call it. It's just going to be the color of dirt. All the walls, it's going to be slightly darker than the floor. And you'll notice that not all the sections of the surrounding wall are actually this dust color. The one close to the hallway is actually, it's going to be just a sheer alabaster white. I'm going to give this dust color to all these weird hay bricks as well. And I'm going to make a new color for wood. It's just going to be a flat shade of brown, perhaps a bit lighter or darker. And you'll have to remember during this that we're not going to be doing too much material work in like a low poly scene. It's more important to focus on lighting, because the problem is if you have super high resolution textures on your low poly models, that's going to look pretty inconsistent, and it's going to really throw off whoever is looking at it, because it just doesn't work. You need to make sure you have a consistent level of detail with whatever you're working with. We're just going to apply more materials. They're all going to be pretty flat. I'm not going to do anything special with them, just adding a diffuse color and just changing up the albedo a bit so it works in a way that looks right. And I'm going to select this back wall here, and I'm going to color it white, like in the photo reference. Just a reminder that photo reference in the bottom is done by a free software that's super powerful called PureRef, and I really recommend you check it out. P-U-R-E-R-E-F. I'm going to select the floor and give it a bit of a more distinct texture, shader, because right now it looks exactly the same as the walls, and I don't really want that. See, I'm going to try to texture it with a bit of, I'm not sure what this material is called. Well, it's pretty much just cracked dirt, but I'm going to try to give it a bit of that cracked dirt look with a Veroni texture that's sharpened quite a bit using a converter. But I think, so you'll notice here that it will look a bit strange because I have a higher resolution texture than the low resolution models sort of fit with, so I don't actually want that. So I'm going to probably end up discarding this effect or making it extremely invisible. So we have sort of that effect, but I don't think I want to keep that because it looks pretty inconsistent with the rest of the scene. And you can see what I mean here by using high resolution textures. Not a good idea. An area light for the door. I know that there's no actual lights coming in through that tunnel into B site, but I think it adds a bit. Now you'll notice that the shadow rendering here is a bit weird with Eevee. I'm not really sure why that is, because the door itself doesn't actually cast a shadow unless I change a couple of settings. And you'll also notice the low resolution shadows. That can be fixed later in the shadow settings. We'll keep these wheels a darker color than the rest of the car, and we can link the materials in each of the wheels so that we don't have to do this 4 times. And we'll also shade in the bumper, and now we'll try to shade in the seats, which is going to be a bit of a pain to select them. So let's try to select them, and we'll give them the same color as the wheels, just so we can see something that's a bit darker inside, not only rendered by the shadow, but by a new material. We'll give the doors the same dust color, but remember this time we were smart and we added a vertex group so that we can make a darker color and just attach to it without having to select everything again, which is great. You should always make vertex groups when you think you're going to have to assign a new material to something. because otherwise it's going to be kind of a pain to do it later. Now, I'm just going to increase the shadow sizes a bit, and you can notice this looks a little bit bland. There's not too much color variation here, and that's because our lighting is basically two lights of the same color, which of course is not great. So we're going to definitely have to deviate a little bit from the actual game, also fix a couple of weird wall cases like this. Right, okay, so now that's fixed. I just set up a bit of a camera turntable rig. I can show you how to do that maybe in another tutorial, but it's just a camera animated along a path, a circular path, just with its target fixed at an empty in the center of the scene, so it always looks at that even while it's going around the path. Now there's a couple details I realized I missed, which I'm going to add here. I have a couple windows and these ventilation slots in the top. I'm going to try not to loop cut the whole thing, and I'm going to have to make some of these things not quads. And I'm going to inset individually, so you just hit I twice, and that's going to inset each of the faces. And I'm going to try to select every single one of these edge loops to make a bit of artificial shadow by just shading them darker. And this is a good idea because we really want to accentuate it, and our current lighting does not give us that capacity to shade it darker. Alright, still a little bit flat, we'll work on that. These blue barrels, we want to make sure they're not too saturated, and we're going to just try to separate them because right now they're all linked, so they'll be forced to have the same color, and I'm not sure how to unlink them because it seems that that keyboard shortcut has changed since Blender 2.79. Okay, so we can't really give these too much of a dust overlay, but we can shade in the tops with a dust color, which I think will add a little bit to their detail. You'll notice that the ridges we added in the barrels are not super pronounced, and perhaps I could have shaded them white. If you wanted to recreate this scene, I would suggest you shade in the offset edges. Now for a bit of compositing. Now we're not done our scene yet, but I just want to add a bit of color grading so we can change the color balance. So lift is for the lightest colors in your scene, gamma is for the middle colors. Or is that right? I'm not sure, you should probably look that up yourself. Lift may actually be for the shadows. Anyways, I'm just going to make a couple adjustments to the colors just so it's a bit redder in the actual scene. Now I'm going to add a point light to the actual spot marker where you're supposed to plant the bomb. You could also add the painted lines as to where the whole bomb site is, but that's not super necessary here. Now I'm just going to add a decently high intensity red light out there, just to add a bit of lighting contrast to our scene. I'm going to fix this area light. I'm going to just make sure we have a good enough intensity for everything. I can increase the shadow resolution here just so it's a bit stronger, but you'll have to remember, since our geometry is not that complex, we don't actually need a super high shadow resolution because it's not really going to make a difference. Okay, so we'll do the floor again, and this time we're going to make it a bit reflective just because I think that looks cool, and I think that will fit into the low poly model sort of aesthetic. Alright, so it's not looking bad right now. We just have a couple minor adjustments perhaps to make at this point. We can add those vents in the back, and I'm going to try to change the geometry a bit. I'm going to realize this is a bad idea and delete this upper wall thing later because I kind of want all the walls to be on the same level. Now I'm going to try to inset this without actually messing up the rest of the scene by adding a ton of vertices. And I'm going to take each of these, I'm going to inset them individually and just shove them into the back. Now you'll notice that from the back of the model this is actually going to mess up that geometry. I'm going to play around with orthographic view. Typically, an orthographic view is a good idea for low poly scenes, but it turns out that animation in orthographic view is going to cause some pretty messed up looking distortions, and we really don't want that. Also, I'm going to accidentally use the sculpt tool and kind of displace a bit of my floor, which you're not going to see here, but it's going to be something you need to fix. Be careful when you do that. An extra light going through these doors just for some consistency, and I'm going to turn it a bit of a light golden color. Again, I know there's no light that's coming even in that direction, but I think it gives a nice effect. Okay, so here's where I'm going to try to fix the floor and make it more even. And here we go. Now, here's something you are not going to do because this is actually going to crash. Don't try to add volumetrics here, or at least save before you do, because if you don't, you may end up losing a lot of work. I think the volume scatter is a good idea for this, though the principal volume is actually quite powerful and not a bad idea to use. But basically what's going to happen is this is going to crash as soon as I try to render it, and I'm going to render it separately again just with a black background and pretty much no other changes. So that's the tutorial. Here's a bit of a look at how the scene is actually played out with the proper lighting and everything. And if you enjoyed this tutorial, please give it a like and subscribe, or whatever the hell the YouTube algorithm prefers these days. Also, be sure to check out some of my other videos and also my website, wintermutedigital.com, for a lot of free Blender tutorials and also Unity stuff if you're interested in that. And yeah, also, on a personal note, I've almost hit 1,000 subs. I think I have 998 by the time of this recording, so if we could get over that, that would be amazing. I didn't expect to make it this far, but thanks to everyone who's subscribed and made this become real. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.